Hey, it's Mike Rohn. If I have a choice, I like to do business with companies that actually stand for something. That's why I switched from Verizon to Pure Talk. No offense to Verizon, I'm sure they stand for something. I just don't know what it is. Pure Talk, on the other hand, is a veteran-owned company that supports our military in a big way, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I also appreciate unlimited talk and text and plenty of data for half the cost of the big guys, and I do like being on America's most dependable 5G network for just $20 a month, but what I really appreciate is no contract, no cancellation fees, and Pure Talk's commitment to handle all their customer service in this country. I saw it for myself. I went to Georgia, I got a tour of their headquarters, I met their CEO, and I talked to the same customer service folks that you'll talk to when you dial pound 250 and say keyword micro. Switch today and save 50% off your first month when you dial pound 250 and say keyword micro. Pure Talk, a wireless company that actually stands for something.
The new Pope praises the benefits of sports.
Pope Leo XIV closed the Jubilee of Sport with a Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, reminding everyone that sports can be a means of reconciliation and encounter. He told thousands of athletes of all levels, backgrounds, and sports that more than obtaining physical achievements, athletes should give of themselves for others. He said, "Sport is joy of life, a game, a celebration, and champions are not perfectly functioning machines." Sabina Castelfranco, CBS News, Rome.
A new AP NORC poll finds that just over a month after Pope Leo became the first U.S.-born pontiff, American Catholics are feeling excited about their new leader. About two-thirds of American Catholics have a very or somewhat favorable view of Pope Leo, while about 3 in 10 do not know enough to have an opinion, they say. Matt Piper, CBS News.
I'm Larry Magid with the Connect Safely report. In her blog post this week, Connect Safely Education Director Carrie Gallagher reports on some fascinating research on the relationship between where students place their phones and how well they do on tests.
In an often replicated study, 3 groups of students all took the same tests and all reported not thinking about their phones at all while taking them. The group with the lowest scores had their phones turned off but upside down, located on their desks. The second highest score group had their phones located in their pockets or in their bags, also turned off. And the group with the highest scores had their phones located outside the testing room.
In other words, even if you're not looking at your phone, its mere proximity can have an impact. You'll find Carrie's blog post and video and a link to this study at connectsafely.org/radio. With the Connect Safely report, I'm Larry Magid for CBS News.
Think you've got what it takes to win? Tune in every Friday on Wave 105 FM with Patty Arroyo for the Hilton Trivia Challenge. Test your knowledge and you can score dinner for 2 at the Hilton Guam Resort and Spa. It's brought to you by the Hilton Guam Resort and Spa only on Wave 105 FM.
Pat's Tinting and Detailing offers premier services from complete interior cleaning and VIP detailing. And to keep you cool, Pat's also offers factory, ceramic, blacked out, and BASE-approved auto tinting. For more information, call 647-SLAM.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm Matt Piper. Air raid sirens echo into the skies of Jerusalem. Israel and Iran traded strikes for a 3rd straight day. And while CBS News has learned that President Trump opposed a recent Israeli plan to kill Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tells Fox.
Actually, there's so many false reports of conversations that never happened, and I'm not going to get into that.
CBS's Robert Berger is in Jerusalem.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went to the site of one of these attacks and said Iran would pay a very heavy price for what he described as the premeditated murder of civilians, women, and children. Shortly after he spoke, the Israeli Air Force carried out heavy strikes on Tehran in broad daylight.
A news conference is planned for next hour by the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. It comes after authorities said they have found a vehicle belonging to the suspect identified in the targeted shootings of 2 Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses this weekend. Senator Amy Klobuchar earlier on CNN speaking about State Rep Melissa Hortman.
This was clearly politically motivated. It was an assassination. And Melissa Hortman is the most incredible person that I wish everyone in the nation knew her. Went into politics with little kids. That's how I got to know her. We were both moms in politics.
A 39-year-old man is dead after being shot during a No Kings protest yesterday in Salt Lake City. Police Chief Brian Redd.
No one should fear coming to a demonstration, peaceful and lawful demonstration in our city. And what happened last night was sudden and alarming.
All right. Hafa Day. There you go. Hafa Day, and welcome back. You're tuned in to Challenge the Status Quo. My name is Melvin Wampat Borja. This show is brought to you by the Commission on Decolonization and our friends over at Glimpses. We have a fun show lined up today. I'm hoping that there's still folks out there who are got their Philippines independence hangover going on because they went hard and celebrated the mark of the anniversary of Philippine sovereignty and independence. Pretty exciting stuff. There's obviously a really huge Filipino community in Guam that is actively, engaged in the issue that celebrates annually. And we wanted to take the opportunity to kind of connect the dots between the historical struggle of the Filipino people for political sovereignty and independence, alongside Guam's historic struggle for the same. As you may or may not know, Guam is actually became a U.S. territory at the same time as the Philippines. For those of you that are still kind of brushing up on your Google history here. The Spanish-American War concluded with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, and that essentially sold Guam, Cuba, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico to the United States as territories. And so the Philippines is a fantastic example of a country's exercising their right to self-determination and eventual full measure of self-government. I know there's always a lot of criticism out there when we talk about, you use the comparative analysis of the Philippines and Guam. And like every nation, there are growing pains and there are challenges that a country and nation will face in their rise to political sovereignty. But nonetheless, I think that what's admirable is the Filipino people never wavered in their desire for self-government. And obviously, just like us, it was very nuanced. There are a lot of differing opinions about, how that should happen. Should that happen in partnership with Spain? Should it happen in partnership with the United States? Should it happen as a, primarily independence-based movement? And there are a lot of different perspectives, but nonetheless, the people exercised their right to self-determination, asserted a desire for their political status, and that's where we're at today. So I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Tabitha Espina, who's here with us to have a discussion about Guam's political status and kind of in the context of Filipino independence. And we don't have a whole lot of time with Dr. Espina, so we're going to just jump right into it and get this conversation rolling. Welcome, Dr. Espina. Thank you for being here with us this morning.
Hafa Day and Suzus Maasi, Melvin, and to Challenge the Status Quo for inviting me, and most especially for giving this space to talk about Philippine independence, especially given recent events with the Lapu-Lapu Festival in Vancouver, British Columbia, and like you said, the desire for independence and self-determination being a shared kind of compelling call across several nations throughout the Pacific. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an exciting thing, and I think that this is something that is important for the way that the conversation evolves locally for Guam.
Yes.
And to be fair, the Commission on Decolonization is not built to advocate for any one particular status. Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about independence today in the context of the Philippines, which I think is appropriate. But I think at least for the Commission on Decolonization, the focus here is on the right to self-determination and a full measure of self-government, right? Which can be attained through three particular avenues, right? One is full integration, which oftentimes we refer to as statehood. The other is free association with the United States. And the last, of course, is independence, political independence. And, to just in the context of the Philippines, this was part of the ongoing or part of the debate in the Philippines at a local level about, what will attain a full measure of self-government. Now, though all three options provided an avenue for self-government, obviously the majority of Filipinos had a preference, that preference being independence. And so, the reason why I wanted to have this discussion today, I thought it was really timely, really. We're prepping out for the show this week, and it just kind of came up, oh man, we just missed the anniversary of Filipino independence, and we started talking about it, and we figured, shoot, if we're going to discuss this, it has to be Monday. Like this show, this is it. It's this show or no go. So we're really excited. Thank you for taking the invitation on short notice. And to put this in context for our local listeners, big part of the motivation in inviting Dr. Espina to the show this morning was that Dr. Espina is one of the members of Filipinos for Tomorrow Independence, which is a local nonprofit organization, community organization that has advocated in support of the Native inhabitants' right to self-determination. Yes. This was a really important effort for me personally because, we work very closely in a field that often makes reference to the Davis case.
Yes.
I don't even like saying the Davis case. I need to find like another name, like a code name for the Davis case. I feel like I give Dave Davis extra life. Every time I say it, it's like I'm recharging the extra life, and I don't like recharging the extra life on this. But nonetheless, the Davis case is an important aspect of this local conversation because it is essentially and effectively brought the referendum element to halt, right? Like there's nothing doing on the referendum until either the Guam legislature goes in and changes the law or writes a new law that would comply with the federal court's imposition, or if a non-government organization steps in and decides to facilitate the vote instead of the government doing it. Now, that also is precarious in the sense that the NGO can't just be seen as a proxy for the government, can't just appear to be doing what the government has been prohibited from doing. Now, that said, one of the things that really kind of rubbed me the wrong way when all of this was going down was Dave Davis actually came out in the media and said, oh, well, I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for all the disenfranchised Filipinos on Guam who can't vote. And I just was shocked. I was just like, wait a minute, time out. When did Dave Davis become like the champion for all Filipinos on Guam? Because none of the Filipinos,
our concerns were so top of mind for him.
Yeah, that was the thing. Like, who knew? Like, who knew that Dave Davis was cooler with all the Filipinos than me, man? Like, I thought that I was doing pretty good in my life. I went to school up in Jigo, a lot of Filipino homies. I felt like, my family's from Agat. Like, all the Camp Rojas Filipinos are like cool with us. I thought that like I was on it. I did not realize that,
we needed Dave Davis.
Yeah, that Dave Davis was so necessary. So, it really kind of bothered me. And when I started having this discussion, just among my Filipino friends, about their perspective, like, how do you feel about Dave Davis being your champion? It just kind of kept coming up that there are so many Filipino people on Guam who are undeniably Guam, right? Like these are Filipinos who are second, third, fourth, fifth generation Filipinos who know no other home than Guam. are undeniably Filipino, proud Filipino people. And, and from their particular tribe too. Yeah. Like these are not like the generic, like, oh yeah, I'm Filipino and just like blanket statement. They like know who they are, where their families are from, what particular tribe, what dialect they speak and all of that, everything. And it's so, when I started having these conversations, a lot of people expressed that, they stand in solidarity with us because in particularly because of this, this very important experience in the exercise of self-determination, and the parallels that we share, right? We were both Spanish colonies. It was not a pretty scene for either of us. It was a very violent occupation. But there are still very real remnants of that colonial era that we have embraced, right? One of which, obviously, I think is Catholicism, right? 99% of Filipinos are Catholic. 99% of Chamorros are Catholic. And so, the church, the Catholic faith is one of those things that, for better or for worse, it's a part of our culture, a part of our reality. But, nonetheless, the transition from Spanish occupation to American occupation was very complex, and had a lot of very particular, in-your-face kind of challenges along the way.
Yes, nation building can nation building can be. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. And so, I always thought that the Philippines was an excellent example for Guam to use in its analysis and its preparation for an act of self-determination for a referendum. And I think it's especially important because the Philippines history has, a chapter of very real and extreme violence.
Yes.
Which is something that I think people on Guam are acutely aware of. I don't think that anybody on Guam wants to, have a civil war on the island in order to attain self-government. I don't think anybody wants that. But, history has shown that, people of a nation can only be pushed so far before something gives. And so, what I admire about Guam's struggle, though it has been very long and very difficult, is that there has been this very deep commitment to engage in a fully recognized international process in an attempt to avoid a violent altercation.
Yes.
And I think that that's a very important element. There are a number of people around the world who, like the Philippines, who have, attained a full measure of self-government, but it came, it came at the cost of a war. I was just recently in Dili in Timor-Leste because they did the United Nations hosted their UN regional seminar in Timor-Leste. And Timor-Leste is a member of the C-24, which is a special committee for decolonization. And they are coincidentally the last colonized nation to exercise their right to self-determination and change their status. Today, they are diplomatic allies with Indonesia, but they were at war with Indonesia from like the 80s till 1999 or something like that. No, wait, 1999 till, I can't remember if it started in 99 or ended in 99, but it was like over a 10-year war with Indonesia. And it was extremely violent, extremely problematic for their community. And even at the highest levels, even with their conversations with their ambassadors, it's one of the things that they are very sensitive and mindful of. And they empathize with the struggle of Guam, but also turn around and emphasize the importance of peaceful resolution.
Yes, civil discourse.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a very interesting thing because on one side they're over here like encouraging us, yes, you got, the people of Guam really need to be assertive and aggressive and deliberate about this. And then on the other side, they say, you got to maintain peaceful relations with the United States because the last thing that you want is a war.
Yeah.
This is what we experienced. And now, they're in a place, obviously, that now they're allies with their enemy, which is not unheard of. I think that that's just kind of the evolution of global politics, you know, through the years, is that we kind of learn how to figure out ways to coexist.
And that's a tension that's often seen as well in Philippine revolutionary history. When you ask people, who is the Philippines' national hero? Those who see the value of civil discourse, those who privilege the pen over the sword will say, it's Jose Rizal, who was kind of my introduction into kind of the rhetorics of civil discourse and what it means to actually self-determine. And so while he was fighting for independence from Spain, the way he did so in a sophisticated and in a very thoughtful way really spoke to me. While others will say, no, we need the sword. We need the Mabinis and the Apolinarios to stand up. And I think a measured response is, like you said, recognizing the complexity of what resistance actually looks like in multiple fronts. So
and I think that's the thing that I try to focus on in the Philippines as our context example, right? Is that it was extremely nuanced in the case of the Philippines.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people who are adamantly nonviolent, a lot of people who are very like Malcolm X by any means necessary. But I think that's a good indicator that across the board, what was agreed upon was that the people of the Philippines had a right to govern themselves. They had, and more importantly, they had a desire to do so.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I think is important for us here in Guam. A lot of times the decolonization and self-determination conversation gets dominated by these ideas that decolonization and self-determination are synonymous with independence.
Yes, thank you.
And
for
they can be, absolutely. Like independence is a very viable option. It's a proven option globally, right? But so too is integration, and so too is free association.
Yes.
And we've seen our neighbors in Micronesia, our closest neighbors in Micronesia, in the RMI and the FSM and in Palau, who have effectively used allied relationships with their former colonizer to attain a full measure of self-government. We just had our Fanhita conference not too long ago, and one of our featured guests was Larry Regatel, who was part of the office that dealt with their political status and eventual rise into United Nations membership. He had mentioned that in their negotiations, one of their most important allies was Japan, and they deliberately used their what do they call them? Nisei, I think.
Yes,
Nisei?
the Nisei.
Yeah, the Nisei group, right? Like those the people from the FSM who are either indigenous from one of the islands in the Federated States, who were also part Japanese.
Japanese, yes.
And so they had these existing kind of Japanese connections, and they used those deliberately to kind of garner the support of the Japanese government, which I think was a very intelligent move.
That's
absolutely
very smart, yeah.
Like I've always wondered why we're not more deliberate on getting Spain involved in this discussion, because I think there's strength in the Treaty of Paris. Like the Treaty of Paris says native inhabitant, which we were challenged on. Like it says that.
Speaking of Davis case, sorry.
Yeah, the right. The rights of the civil and political rights of the native inhabitants will become the responsibility of Congress.
Yes.
And Congress obviously has not delivered on this obligation, this promise.
And so your first question was, on June 12th, the Philippines marked its 127th Independence Day. Celebrations for this anniversary were held in Guam. And I think it's important to note that the Philippines being recognized as an independent nation wasn't until the 1940s.
Right.
But the Filipinos, because the declaration, what we're celebrating of Independence Day is the actual declaration. Whether or not it was recognized is apart from the feelings of that desire, that resistance, and the acknowledgement of that. So I think to say 127th Independence Day is a recognition and honoring of the Declaration of Independence. Whether or not the Philippines is officially officially recognized as an independent nation in 1940, I think 1946. That's apart from when the Philippines became a nation in the minds and the hearts of Filipinos. So I thought that was a beautiful statement. And in talking about Guam's decolonization, how we articulate a subject position is important. I think what you said about self-determination and its common associations with independence is an important thing to discuss, because Filipinos for Guam, while we recognize that independence is one way of self-governing and self-determination, we recognize that it is the people of Guam, the Chamorro people, who have the right to self-determine. And so I'm going to pull up a quote from Tito William Hernandez. And because I was discussing this with him, he's a Filipino historian and who's done this work for decades. And he said very poignantly that Chamorro's right to self-determination is actually a right to their sovereignty. Now in a colonial occupation since the 17th century. So when we think of self-determining, it's actually, I am fighting for the right to determine for myself and an assertion of my sovereignty.
Right.
So I thought that was beautiful, because I think, like
agree.
you said, it gets mixed up in particular political designations, but actually the claim to the Declaration of Independence, the declaration to self-determine, is a declaration of sovereignty.
Right. And I think it's beautiful that we, and I'm glad that you made that distinction about, the Declaration of Filipino independence versus the kind of global recognition, right, of that desire. And I think it says a lot, 127 years, or whatever math you want to run if we're talking about 1946, but worldwide, Filipinos recognize the Declaration, not everybody else's acknowledgement.
Yes,
right, which I think is very important, and I think that says a lot. That 127 years, this is what we're recognizing all over the world. And people everywhere have just kind of gotten on board, right? Because if Filipinos don't say, "Oh, well, let's do this one and then let's do the other one,"
but everyone else said this. It's like, no, we said
this is our anniversary. Period. You know what I mean? We get to pick the date.
Yes.
You don't get to pick the date.
Sovereignty.
Right. That's the whole point. And I think that's an important distinction. I think it's a very significant assertion, and I think that's the lesson that always has resonated with me. Right? Is that it didn't really matter what anybody else thought. It didn't really matter what people's desire or appetite was for recognition. What mattered was what the people's desires reflected, and that they were able to come together and create this declaration.
Yes.
Even the declaration was tough.
Yes.
I think that even after the war was kind of, I wouldn't even say it was settled, but after the war, it kind of the people had gone to that point where they're like, okay, well, we've kind of fought this thing out.
Yes.
We have, nobody wants any part of this. Spain, not America, not Spain. They're done.
Yeah.
So it really truly is on us.
Yeah.
And I think that even in that, in that moment of Filipino history, it was still abundantly complicated.
Yeah.
And so, just the mere act of saying, okay, we're going to rally around this and we're going to sign this declaration.
Yes, we'll figure it out along the way.
Right. I think was indicative of the nature of decolonization.
Yes.
Decolonization is not a simple thing. You know what I mean? It is abundantly complex. There's a lot of layers to it, a lot of factors, a lot of elements that have to be considered. And it's never done. Like even after you assert your desire for independence or integration or free association, there inevitably is there's going to be a period of growth and transition.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that has become really important to me personally in this role when we talk about decolonization and political status, is that a lot of people have this running fear that it goes from one extreme to the other in 24 hours.
Yes.
That I don't want to do that. Why would I want to do that? Why would I want to self-determine? Because if I do that, if we decolonize, that means that the U.S. is just gonna pack up and leave today, and then tomorrow China will be on our shores ready to invade, and then we're just kind of starting all over again. And I always remind people that it's not like here today, gone tomorrow kind of scenario. First of all, there's this very real and recognized international obligation for not just the United States, but all the colonizers of the world, right? The Brits are in there, the French are in there, all of them.
Because all the Philippines is independent, there are businesses, there is economic dependency on larger countries. Like that's inescapable. And yet they are still able to be independent, yet function and maintain their sovereignty across economic and political kind of paradigms.
And I think that the thing that really, we have a caller. Shoot, okay. Caller is going to stop me before I was about to go off on the soapbox. I was ready. I was like getting ready to launch. Okay. Hafa Adai caller, you're on the air with us. No, almost. Hafa Adai caller, are you there? Hafa Adai. Oh, there you are.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. You're on the air with us.
Okay, so you have not read the United Nations requirements for self-determination. The United Nations requires universal suffrage, adult suffrage. The United Nations does not recognize group rights. It recognizes individual rights. So any vote in Guam on self-determination, all eligible voters, regardless of their ancestry, are allowed to vote. That's a United Nations requirement, universal adult suffrage.
Thank you for the call and the comment. Yes, you are right. The United Nations does recognize universal suffrage. However, the United Nations also recognizes a right of a people to self-determine, especially those of nations who have a history of colonial rule. Yes. And so, there are...
Right, but the people, United Nations does not recognize, nowhere do they mention the word native inhabitants. Nowhere. That people of a place are all the people who live within the boundaries of the place. It doesn't matter who their ancestors were. If they are inhabitants, they are entitled to vote.
You are absolutely right to a degree. You're right. They don't say native inhabitant. You know who said native inhabitant? The United States.
That was a long time ago.
Oh, yeah. So they get to change their mind when it's convenient for them. That's ideal. Thank you, caller, for your comment and your opinion. I think that you're absolutely right. There is a precedent set on international law that recognizes universal suffrage. It absolutely is recognized by the United Nations. However, so too is the right to self-determination, and so too is the right to self-determination in the context of an ongoing colonial relationship. And so, this is similar, I think, to there's this debate about which political statuses are legitimate, right? Mm-hmm. Resolutions 1541, 1540, 1514 regularly are referenced as kind of the standard of, what is acceptable, what meets the criteria of a full measure of self-government. Now, there's another UN resolution like 26 for something, I don't know, I can't remember. It talks about or any other status, right? Any other status that is mutually agreed upon by the colonizer and the colony. This is often kind of brought back in like, we should be able to use this to maintain the status quo. And I think that that's the challenge, is that even at an international level, that resolution has been constantly challenged as a way to legitimize the ongoing colonial relationship, which is, completely out of pocket. And so there's a reason why 1541 and 1514 have been continually referenced and upheld by the international community, is because those are the most acceptable versions of the delivery of a full measure of self-government. Yes. So yes, absolutely, caller. You're right. There's nothing in the United Nations that mentions native inhabitants. Ironically, it was the United States and Spain who agreed to that in an international treaty, which is supposed to be the highest law of the land. I think it's abundantly convenient that the United States gets to just completely disregard an international treaty, so many years later, 127 years later, and say, let's go to our own court system and decide this for ourselves. I mean, let's just take this in principle, okay? There's the insular cases that have been, these are like, 100 and some years old, 120 years old or so. Mm-hmm. The insular cases has been challenged within the legal framework time and time again. And Congress and the judiciary has consistently upheld that, yes, we recognize that the insular cases are overtly racist.
Yes.
But these are still considered good law, good American law. And so let's just take that principle for a moment.
And the Treaty of Paris, 1989, is what it's like what you mentioned at the top of the show. It's within those racist paradigms and in those racist laws and contradictory laws that sparked kind of these feelings within the Philippines of we desire independence. And while I recognize that political status is complicated, and I'm glad that you mentioned that the processes of decolonization are complicated. I also wanted to bring up because I think what gets caught up a lot of times in talking about politics are also the emotions, right? And so I think when we think in context about the Treaty of Paris, what it is that the Philippines wanted, how they articulated it, the national anthem in English is translated as "Beloved country, pearl of the Orient, the burning fervor of the heart in your bosom ever alive. Chosen land, you are the cradle of the brave. To the conquerors, you shall never be oppressed. Through the seas and through the mountains, through the air and through the skies of yours azure, there's splendor in the poem, and song for freedom, beloved. The sparkle of the flag that is yours is a victory that is shining. The stars and sun of it forever shall never dim. Land of the sun, of glory and of love, life is heaven in your embrace. It is our joy if there will be oppressors to die because of you." So like you were saying, despite what is believed about a country and its politics, it's undeniable that people were willing to die for the right to self-determine, to free themselves from oppressors as they define those oppressors. And even as those oppressors were articulating through the Treaty of Paris who the Philippines, Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Guam belong to.
Right. And I think that that's a challenge for me personally, is that, on one side, it's like the colonial power has the luxury of being able to decide and define, what is morally correct or acceptable when it's convenient, and that's the thing that really kind of burns my bubble here, is that, the law that was challenged in the Davis case is also good Guam law. And is that not the point of why we're here? Right? Like they say that Guam is self-governing, but this is Exhibit A. This is a perfect example of how we are indeed not self-governing, right? This law went through all the democratic processes that, by the way, mirror the American processes, right? I mean, it's exactly the same. So we go through our policy body, which is the Guam legislature, all elected in a public open election with universal suffrage, my friend, right? And then they go in, like they do in everywhere else in the United States, into a representative format of democracy. They propose legislation. That legislation is held and heard publicly. Where was Dave Davis in the public hearing? That's what I want to know. Where Dave Davis at? You know what I mean? He could have gone and lobbied all of his senators to vote that thing down, and it didn't happen.
Maybe in one of the multiple homes.
Maybe. I mean, maybe he was like out in the high concentration Filipino areas trying to figure out what it is that they wanted so that he could plan
I wasn't consulted, so I might not be in with the Filipinos.
I have yet to meet a Filipino who is like, yeah, Dave Davis, that's my guy. So, I mean, my thing is like, why is it a constant reminder that, why is the hypocrisy a constant reminder of our inequity? And that's the thing that gets me every single time.
Yes.
Is that, if we are truly self-governing, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. But there is a very clear difference in the way that Guam engages under the principles of democracy and self-government. And we do not have that same kind of access to the system that ultimately is going to decide things for us. Anybody who wants to argue that Guam is not unilaterally controlled by the federal government, you did not do your homework. So my friend caller, trust me, homie, I read the UN Declaration. I read I did my homework. Yes, you are right. The United Nations recognizes universal suffrage. I read that one too. Yeah. But I mean, it's a good opportunity to read your own U.S. history. Yes. The one that was forced down our throats and at the expense of ours.
And you bring up a really good point, Melvin, that imagine there's a law that's saying native inhabitants, but the actual indigenous people of the land can't define that.
Right.
That's wild. And that's why Filipinos for Guam said it's hypocritical. And that's why Filipinos for Guam said, wait. We don't want to have the quote unquote same rights as native inhabitants. We don't want to be lumped in, which is what Davis was saying. He goes, we're all native inhabitants, right, Filipinos? And the Filipinos said, no. We don't think we have the right to define that. And so, again, this goes to how these laws, yes, the definition, but imagine being an indigenous person of this land and not being even able to have the law reflect your own definitions of sovereignty.
I mean, I think it's an interesting, it's a very nuanced case, obviously.
Yes.
But, I even look at it like the way our law defined eligibility. Yes, we use the term native inhabitant, but let's unpack the definition of that term. In order to be considered a native inhabitant, you had to be made a U.S. citizen by virtue of the Organic Act in 1950 and all of your descendants.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, I thought that took a lot of foresight by our political leaders to say, let's use this time marker, not a race marker, not an ethnicity marker, a time-based political marker. Yes. Why the Organic Act? I mean, it's not rocket science. The Organic Act is the document that effectively, the policy that made everyone on Guam in 1950 U.S. citizens. Blanket. It didn't matter who you were, where you were from, whatever. If you were on Guam in 1950, you became a U.S. citizen. Now, it's not to say that there were no people in Guam who wanted to be U.S. citizens. There are a lot of people, I'm sure, who wanted to be U.S. citizens. Even those people, I think, didn't get what they thought they were bargaining for. But the point here is that the Organic Act, no matter how you spin it, the Organic Act is an act of Congress, period.
Yes, it is.
It is an act of Congress. Name me one Tomoru that was involved in crafting and writing and conceptualizing the Organic Act of Guam. I'll wait. Caller, what you got? Anything? Nobody. There was not a single Tomoru who was involved in that process. Is it a democratic process? I think the writing's on the wall. What about the signing of the Organic Act?
Who's democracy?
Who signed the Organic Act of Guam? It was Congress. It was Congress and the president. Oh, yeah, the president we don't vote for? Yeah, that one. The president signed it. Go look up the famous picture of the signing of the Organic Act. There's one Tomoru there. And granted, he's a very important Tomoru. That's the Honorable Carlos Taitano. Did you know that Carlos Taitano was a student at Georgetown University when he was there? Yeah. He wasn't the speaker of the Guam legislature. There was no Guam legislature. Yeah. He took his opportunity, and bless his soul, okay? Bless his heart for being there and having the opportunity to be like, man, something historic is happening. I need to get me an invite to the White House. I still have no idea how he got that invite to the White House. But, hey, man, props to Carlos Taitano for being able to be there in his fresh white suit. He looked fantastic. And that was a proud moment for a lot of us, and rightfully so, because at that time, Tomorus were a people without a nation, right? Tomorus were experiencing an unprecedented land grab at the time. Yeah. We always kind of bark
from one to oppressive.
Yeah. We always get upset about like, oh, the military they have like 1/3 of the whole island. You know that back then it was 2/3. Yeah, back then it was 2/3 of the island. And it wasn't until we started to, build out this local self-government, this local system of government, that we started to challenge that and say, hey, you can't be doing this. And that's why I say that I don't think a lot of Tomorus realized what they were getting into when they got citizenship. I think most Tomorus thought, well, shoot, if I'm a U.S. citizen, the one thing these guys respect is land ownership. Maybe that's going to be the way that I protect my land, and I'm able to not have my land seized and acquired by the federal government. Oh, See, that's what happens when we didn't get a chance to do our homework. We didn't know.
And Filipinos, similarly, when they were sent. So after the Treaty of 1989, right, Mabini is exiled alongside some other political dissidents, and then Filipinos, there's been a continued history of Filipino exile,
right.
And some who are sent as workers are promised, oh, you're going to get land, you're going to get
they
citizenship.
send them to Guam too.
And then they're
like, all these rebel rousers out, send them to Guam. Nobody knows about Guam yet. We can hide them there like indefinitely.
Yes. And so Filipinos continue to be, whether they're political exiles or sent, as workers, as contract workers, they're made promises about land and security
right.
for themselves and their families, and
right. then... Right. And I thought that it was really, really insightful for our local leaders to say, let's use the Organic Act of Guam as a time-based political marker. Mm-hmm. Because then what it does is it puts it in the classification as a political recognition, right? Which is not that different than affirmative action, y'all. You heard of that one, caller? Do the homework on that. That's a political definition. And granted, yes, I acknowledge that we lost in the racist judicial system. But, nonetheless, like, I think that this is an important assertion by the people who are non-self-governing. Mm-hmm. I think I often think about our neighbors in Palau, right, who are very integrated into our community, right? There are so many Palauans who are born and raised in Guam. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's a really important it's an important classification, because what is also necessary for Palauans to continue to participate in their local system of government is that they have to remain residents of Palau, right? Like, voting for your Palauan president does not apply to the Palauans who decided that they wanted to vote in Guam.
Yes, that is so true.
Oh, here we go. I got Hafa, Jardine. You're here with us. We got Reese is not in the building today, but please jump in on this. I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yes, that is so true. So in Palau, you have to be residents and bloodline,
right,
to own land.
Right.
Palau.
Yeah, to own land. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, right? Like, and these are things that are only possible because Palau has a compact of free association, not an organic act, which is a very different thing. Nor would it be possible if Palau was integrated as a state of the United States, because then, as a member of the Union, even though states are recognized as sovereign within their territories, right, the federal policy would supersede that local assertion.
Yeah.
Now, the same thing, or not same, but similar thing happens in the CNMI via their covenant, right? In the CNMI, it's very similar that you have to be a bona fide CNMI resident, descendant, have ancestry in order to own land in the CNMI. That only happens because of their covenant, which is also why the CNMI was adamantly opposed to the abolishing of the insular cases, ironically. I thought that was a really interesting conversation, because we all agree that the insular cases is racist. And even CNMI was like, hell yeah, it's racist. But they were like, but we don't want you to get rid of it.
But yeah, the complications.
Which was legit, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it took me a second to be like, wait, hold on, time out. I got to do my homework. Give me a homework timeout. And, once I started to dig into it and I realized, like, okay, now I understand that there's this very, very real and recent history of work that has been done and executed strategized around the understandings of the insular cases. Understandings that here's this very racist framework that's built to be leveraged against us. Yeah. And then they very intelligently and strategically were like, well, let me see what we can do about that. And I think that was a very, it was a very admirable effort. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's out of pocket for us in a different place to be like, oh, whatever you did over there, scratch all of that. We're going to do something else. But in the same breath, that's decolonization provides the answers for all of these conundrums that we face.
Yes,
right?
It is an inquiry, I think. While we say self-determination, it's a process of self-determining.
Sorry, are you? Is there a caller? Are we trying to? Oh, I thought I was getting the signal. Okay. If you are interested in getting involved in the conversation, the phone number is 922-1051. It's also at 1052. The 922-1051 is on WhatsApp if you want to text your comment or your question. I know that we have some folks on our Instagram, COD Instagram Live that didn't hear the last caller. I just saw the comments. I apologize. I'm late on this. Last caller was upset because he says that there should be recognition of universal suffrage, and that's basically, I'm summarizing here, but that's the issue with the Davis case, right? And proceeding, or the issue on Guam and our referendum is that, we can't have a group classification recognition, which I argue against. Sorry, is there somebody on the line that wants to get in here? Oh, okay. All right, just checking. 922-1051 or 922-1052. We're on WhatsApp. You can also comment on the Instagram channel. I will do my best to just ad lib as we go and summarize the caller, since we can't get the audio onto the Instagram feed. We're going to try to kind of wrap this as best as we can. We got about 5 minutes before the top of the hour. I've totally gone off the reservation and abandoned I gave Dr. Espina this nifty guide sheet of all the questions that we're going to ask.
Questions.
And in true Melvin form, I've just I've been calling audibles all morning.
Spouting brilliance. Let's say that.
The caller set me off. I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it. I was triggered. I was triggered. All right, so but I did want to touch on some of what we have lined up, because I definitely think that it is important in the context of our discussion. So the Philippines' path towards independence involved a strong grassroots movement. Mm-hmm. How do you think the everyday people in Guam today can play a meaningful role in the island's quest for self-determination and decolonization? I think in particular, what do you think are some lessons that we can learn from the Philippines' experience?
I definitely think first, understanding that history, because as I mentioned, it wasn't until I read El Filibusterismo and No Le Tangre, which is Jose Rizal talking about Spanish colonial rule, subverting kind of this allegiance to Spain in a very sophisticated way, trying to basically hide, right? Just the extent of that resistance. I thought it was so clever, it was so smart, and admittedly, it was the very first time I felt pride as a Filipino. Right. I thought to myself, oh, wait, Filipinos, he spoke 6 languages. Wait, Filipinos can travel, speak 6 languages? Wait, Filipinos can be politically active? Right. Growing up, I just didn't know. And then when I read No Le Tangre, I read the struggle. I read just how he was inciting people to understand not just the need for independence, but drawing on people's capability, saying you have capacity to govern yourself. You do not need Spain. Look at how Spain is treating you. Look at the ways that our tribes and our ideas of who we are crumbling under Spanish rule. And it was because of how compelling his prose was that Filipinos, whether they were involved in politics, educated, they rose up to action because of that language, because of such declarations. So I think there's a lot, and Rizal knew that if I could incite the grassroots, if I could incite people in their villages who see a problem and who want to do something about it, that is the path towards independence, or that is the path towards self-governance.
Well, I agree. I mean, I think it was very, very powerful that there were, that there was this very robust art, poetry, music movement in the Philippines that was really aimed at at winning the hearts and the minds of the people, which is really essential to any people movement. Once a people's hearts and minds have been won over, I mean, it changes everything. And I would argue,
stomach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that that's part of what we are experiencing today, right? Is that there are a lot of people whose, hearts and minds are still kind of drinking the Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? And I think that there is still this idea that, that being U.S. citizens gives us all the rights and privileges of every other American, which is absolutely untrue. I mean, I think that the basic things are right there in front of you. We have a modern organized system of government on Guam. We have a modern developed local government, but we just don't participate at the levels that other places do, right? And especially within the United States. We got about 2 minutes to the top of the hour. There is a caller that we're gonna take. I just have to. Caller, I'm just giving you a heads up. We might be cutting off short because we got about 2 minutes left before we got to take a break. Hafa, you're on the air. He's not there.
Hello, can you hear me?
There you are. Hafa, you're on the air.
Okay. In March 5, 1949, the Guam Congress unanimously approved the bill to provide an Organic Act and civil government for the island of Guam, and they forwarded it to the U.S. Congress. Then they held the Guam Congress walkout of 1949 until Congress approved the Organic Act. So the Organic Act was written by the Congress of Guam, petitioned Congress to approve it. This is from Guampedia. So that was an act of self-determination. They demanded U.S. citizenship, and they were given it.
Was there a vote?
So don't claim that
they
had nothing to do with it. They are the ones who initiated and demanded it.
Was there a vote?
And they held a walkout.
Was there a vote?
A vote?
Was there a vote?
The Guam Congress.
Did the people vote?
The people.
Did the people vote?
The people in Guam
Did the
elected
people
the members
vote?
of the Guam Congress.
Did the people vote on it?
Did
the people of Guam vote on it?
Many things. This is an act passed by the representatives of the government of Guam in Guam.
Did the people vote on the Organic
by
Act?
The people of Guam.
Did the people vote on the Organic Act? Did the people vote on the Organic Act?
People don't vote on everything that the Congress passes in Guam.
But they do vote on an act of self-determination.
They were
should.
the ones that they.
Otherwise, it's not an act of self-determination.
If the self cannot
The people of Guam wanted citizenship, so the Guam
Did they vote on it?
Wrote the
Did they
Organic
vote
Act
on the Organic
and
Act?
sent it to Congress.
Did they vote on the Organic Act?
I just told you, they're elected representatives.
So the answer is no. Okay, well, that's pretty straightforward. I think the answer is no. All right. Thank you, caller, for your thanks for getting back on the air. Well done. The question for our Instagram viewers, the caller was referencing that the Guam Congress submitted the Organic Act, petition the U.S. Congress to pass the Organic Act. So caller was arguing that it was an act of self-determination because Guam was responsible for it. If the people didn't vote on it, it cannot be considered a legitimate act of self-determination. I mean, that's why there was a No Kings protest across the nation. I mean, we live in a democracy, do we, or do we not? And there's no such thing as a half democracy. Otherwise, it's not really a democracy. Anyhow, we are at the top of the hour. We do need to take a break. I want to thank our caller for participating in the discussion and all of those of you who are out there listening. Thanks, Dr. Espina, for hanging in here with us. I'm not sure if she's going to have time to stick around for the next hour, but we will sort it out. Nonetheless, we got to take a break. Keep it locked. We'll be right back. You're listening to Wave 105.1 FM. This is Challenge the Status Quo, and we'll be with you in a bit. Adios.
KGUM FM. Daddy No. The talk of Guam is Wave 105 FM.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm Matt Piper. Air raid sirens echo into the skies of Jerusalem. Israel and Iran traded strikes for a third straight day. And while CBS News has learned that President Trump opposed a recent Israeli plan to kill Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tells Fox.
Actually, there's so many false reports of conversations that never happened, and I'm not going to get into that.
CBS's Robert Berger is in Jerusalem.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went to the site of one of these attacks and said Iran would pay a very heavy price for what he described as the premeditated murder of civilians, women, and children. Shortly after he spoke, the Israeli Air Force carried out heavy strikes on Tehran in broad daylight.
A news conference is planned for next hour by the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. It comes after authorities said they have found a vehicle belonging to the suspect identified in the targeted shootings of 2 Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses this weekend. Senator Amy Klobuchar earlier on CNN speaking about State Rep Melissa Hortman.
This was clearly politically motivated. It was an assassination. And Melissa Hortman is the most incredible person that I wish everyone in the nation knew her. Went into politics with little kids. That's how I got to know her. We were both moms in politics.
A 39-year-old man is dead after being shot during a No Kings protest yesterday in Salt Lake City. Police Chief Brian Redd.
No one should fear coming to a demonstration, peaceful and lawful demonstration in our city. And what happened last night was sudden and alarming and not representative of our values here in Salt Lake City.
3 people were also believed to be part of the incident were taken into custody. Days after he was thrown out and handcuffed, Senator Alex Padilla tells Face the Nation he was trying to ask a question to Homeland Security Secretary Christine Ohm about immigration raids.
When I had the audacity to try to ask a question as a senator, and you saw the response, everybody's seen the video, it wasn't about me, right? If that's how this administration responds to a senator with a question, don't just imagine what they're capable of to people without a title like United States Senator.
Padilla did not identify himself before shouting at Nome. Flash flooding caused by torrential rains have killed 4 people in northern West Virginia, and rescue crews are out searching for 4 other missing people. Officials say about 4 inches of rain fell in parts of Wheeling and Ohio County within a half hour last night. Some people climbed up trees to get to safety. This is CBS News.
Think O'Reilly Auto Parts for all your car care needs. Get the parts and service you need fast from the professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hey, it's Mike Rohn. If I have a choice, I like to do business with companies that actually stand for something. That's why I switched from Verizon to Pure Talk. No offense to Verizon, I'm sure they stand for something. I just don't know what it is. Pure Talk, on the other hand, is a veteran-owned company that supports our military in a big way, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I also appreciate unlimited talk and text and plenty of data for half the cost of the big guys, and I do like being on America's most dependable 5G network for just $20 a month. But what I really appreciate is no contract, no cancellation fees, and Pure Talk's commitment to handle all their customer service in this country. I saw it for myself. I went to Georgia, I got a tour of their headquarters, I met their CEO, and I talked to the same customer service folks that you'll talk to when you dial pound 250 and say keyword micro. Switch today and save 50% off your first month when you dial pound 250 and say keyword micro. Pure Talk, a wireless company that actually stands for something.
The new Pope praises the benefits of sports.
Pope Leo XIV closed the Jubilee of Sport with a Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, reminding everyone that sports can be a means of reconciliation and encounter. He told thousands of athletes of all levels, backgrounds, and sports that more than obtaining physical achievements, athletes should give of themselves for others. He said, "Sport is joy of life, a game, a celebration, and champions are not perfectly functioning machines." Sabina Castelfranco, CBS News, Rome.
A new AP NORC poll finds that just over a month after Pope Leo became the first U.S.-born pontiff, American Catholics are feeling excited about their new leader. About 2/3 of American Catholics have a very or somewhat favorable view of Pope Leo, while about 3 in 10 do not know enough to have an opinion, they say. Matt Piper, CBS News.
Fewer and fewer teenagers are getting driver's licenses. The CEO of Uber thinks he knows why. I'm Jeff Colvin of Fortune magazine with the Fortune Business Update. Dara Khosrowshahi is the CEO of Uber, and he says his son, who's over 18, still doesn't have a driver's license. That's part of a trend. In 1983, 80% of 18-year-olds had a license. Now it's only about 60%. One obvious reason would seem to be Uber, Lyft, and other rideshare companies. Why learn to drive if you can just get a ride so easily? Another factor could be increased urbanization. With more young adults living in cities, fewer of them will need or want a car. But it will be a long time before everyone is traveling by Uber. That's because, as big as Uber is, it accounts for less than 3% of miles traveled on the road. I'm Jeff Colvin.
One pill can kill. Fake pills often contain fentanyl. It only takes 2 milligrams of fentanyl, equivalent to a few grains of salt, to be lethal. Fake pills are often sold on social media platforms, making them available to anyone with a smartphone.
Talk early and often to youth about the dangers of misusing prescription drugs and the lethal dangers of counterfeit drugs laced with fentanyl.
Stay informed, stay safe. One pill can kill.
This public service announcement is brought to you by the radio stations of Glimpses Media Group, Wave 105 FM and Power 98.
My family and I trust Take Care. We have access to the largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. Our membership also includes the high-quality credentialed network of on- and off-island healthcare providers and the one-stop FHP Health Center and Urgent Care. Fully accredited by the Accreditation Association of Ambulatory Healthcare. We trust Take Care. So should you. Go to TakeCareAsia.com for more information. Take Care. Our island, your health plan.
Ready. All right, Hafa Day, and welcome back. Thanks for hanging in with us for the quick break. We've been talking a lot about political self-determination in the context of Philippine independence. Their celebration of their Declaration of Independence just happened on June 12th, and I've had Dr. Tabitha Espina in here in the studio with us having this conversation. Dr. Espina does have to head on out of here soon, so I'm going to give her a chance to do some famous last words, and I'll be hanging with you until the end of the show at noon. But Dr. Espina, I want to thank you for being here with us this morning. I know it was pretty intense. It got pretty intense at one point, but you know, what is a struggle without a little bit of intense debate?
It's true.
But thank you for coming in to talk to us about, you know, some of the work that's been happening here on Guam, some of the historical efforts, where the dots connect. I think that this is all very insightful and helpful for our listening audience. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you. And I think that's it says, reflecting on today's conversation and shared colonial histories, what gives you hope in Guam's decolonization movement, and what is one thing everyone in Guam can do to move our quest forward. As a Filipina who born and raised in Guam, the only home really that I've ever known, I think it's important to learn our history. And
Right.
you know, if I was going to take something away from our caller, do our homework, right?
Yeah.
I aspire to the level of confidence, Melvin, with which you shared, and I think that is something we can do as Filipinos in Guam. Really learn our Philippine revolutionary history, learn and feel that resistance, that struggle, and that hustle. Know where it comes from, and then look at the parallel fights for independence. Like we said, Guam and the Philippines have had they've been lumped together in politics through the Treaty of Paris. Right. They've been passed across similar oppressors. And so recognizing where this desire for sovereignty comes from, I think is important. And then it gives you more empathy when you talk to others about what a decolonization on Guam could look like. Right. And because you're sharing it from a real experience and a real felt desire to see, in my mind, justice.
Well, thank you, Dr. Espina. I think that was very well said. And, you know, I think that this is something that resonates with a lot of our listeners. You know, this show is really built to perpetuate these discussions, to allow an open space for people to explore these ideas,
yes,
to learn a little something, to look at the issue from a different angle or a different perspective. And I think that this is all very insightful and very helpful in that regard. So Thank you for sharing your experience and your perspective with us this morning. I hope to have you back on the show sometime. We'll definitely, it sounds like, we might have some very interested callers out there, or maybe just one. Who knows? But if you are one of those and you want to get involved, the number is 671-922-1051 or 1052. And, this is talk radio for a reason. So, it's pretty exciting. You never know what you're going to get. You got to be ready to freestyle a little bit. But, I think that anytime that we have these discussions, it's helpful. And, I think that it's important that we are able to have a discourse. Yes. I think it's important that we're able to, stick to our guns on the things that we think are really important. But also I think it's great that we're able to listen to each other and hear other perspectives and incorporate those views into what we do moving forward. So, thanks for contributing to that. I appreciate your time this morning, and I wish you the best. We'll be hearing from you soon, hopefully.
Yes, this is Maasi. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. If you're still tuned in and you are interested in learning more about the Commission on Decolonization, you can check out our website at decol.guam.gov. You can also follow us on Instagram at GuamCOD and on Facebook at the Commission on Decolonization. We also have a YouTube channel with all of our our digital video materials, educational materials. There's a lot of great stuff that you can avail yourself of. And if you're interested in any of the particular political status options, each of the status options have a task force of volunteers who regularly go out into the community and share information about their particular status preference. So, again, the Commission on Decolonization is not built to advocate for any one particular status. We believe that the most important piece here is a full measure of self-government, that the people of Guam have a right to govern themselves. We have a right to make decisions about what we want to see in our community, what we want to happen in our island, and how we want those things to happen. We have a right to do so without being unilaterally controlled or influenced by the United States Congress or the United States government. And whether that is delivered through full integration or a statehood model, whether it's done through a compact of free association with the United States, or if it's done through a declaration of independence, all three of those options are legitimate pathways to a full measure of self-government. I want to acknowledge we got some callers or some viewers on our Instagram Live. Frankie Anga writes that the caller was completely out of line to claim that. Hang on. I lost it. There's comments coming in. I had to scroll down. My bad. The caller was completely out of line to claim that the people of Guam exercised their right to self-determination with the passage of the Organic Act. He later on goes to write that we didn't even have the ability to elect our own governor at the time. Very important point, Frankie. Thank you for that comment and observation, and thanks for tuning in to our IG Live. It's a very valid point. And, even in the argument from the caller about the Guam Congress involvement in the Organic Act effort, he acknowledged the Guam Congress walkout, which is a very important moment in Guam history. Frankie is correct that we didn't elect our governor until 20 years after the signing of the Organic Act. The United States was telling the rest of the world and the nation that we are fully self-governing, and look, they're U.S. citizens now. So, this is kind of a dead issue. But we weren't even electing our own governor when we became U.S. citizens. I think it's ironic that we went 20 years as U.S. citizens without the ability to elect our governor to the highest office. And the Guam Congress walkout, I think, was very significant in the sense that what was instituted was really a superficial version of local government. It was really just for show. And that was the whole conflict with the Guam Congress, is that they recognized that, they were being assembled, they were being elected, but they weren't really being given the authority to create Guam law. They weren't given the authority to actually lead Guam as a local government. And so they protested that fact. They didn't want to just be put on there for show, just to make people feel better about themselves. That was not the point. Either they were going to be genuinely empowered to govern our people, or they weren't. And, I think it's clear that the Organic Act didn't change that. U.S. citizenship didn't change that. We were citizens already, and we still had to wait 20 years to elect our governor, And it wasn't for a number of years after that we were actually given a non-voting representative in Congress. Today, we still don't have a vote in Congress, and we've never had a vote in the Senate or in the Electoral College. Tell me again how that's fully self-governing in an American system. Anyhow, oh man, I think our caller's back. He is persistent. Hafa, Paul, you're on the air again. Hello.
We were citizens already.
Oh, there we go.
Had to wait.
Hafa, Paul, you're on the air again.
Hi. In 1982, there was a self-determination vote in Guam. In 1982, and the people of Guam voted for a Commonwealth status.
Correct.
And that was the vote. And the U.S. Congress said, okay, write a constitution, and we will grant you Commonwealth. And a few people in the Guam legislature handicapped that, and the Constitution was never written.
But we did create a Guam Commonwealth Draft Act.
The U.S. said, okay, to get Commonwealth, you need a constitution. Write your own constitution.
But that was not the failure of the Guam Commonwealth Draft Act. The Guam Commonwealth Draft Act failure came when the United States Congress refused to adopt the Commonwealth Draft Act that the people had voted on. They said that they would only they would only acknowledge it and sign it into law if we remove the article on immigration and the article on mutual consent for military activities, which we were not willing to do.
And so they held a self-determination in 1982. They could have had another self-determination act vote anytime they wanted. The majority of people in Guam, the overwhelming majority of people in Guam, were Chamorro. Okay? So they held a vote in 19, and it was universal. They could hold another vote anytime, but they need to meet the UN requirement for universal adult.
U.S. requirement.
The United Nations
U.S. requirement.
Individual rights.
U.S. requirement.
Not group rights. I couldn't hear you.
That's okay. All right. Thank you, Paul, for your comment. For our Instagram audience, that was Paul again. He was mentioning that we had a self-determination referendum in the 80s, 1982, in which the majority of people voted on Commonwealth. And he was saying that we were advised by or instructed by Congress to draft a constitution, and that Commonwealth couldn't be delivered without an adopted constitution, which is correct to some degree. But what we did do is that we did vote on a Commonwealth Draft Act. And this was a huge thing in the 80s and mid-80s into the early 90s, was we were heavily pursuing Commonwealth. And the history behind this is that, Guam, as many of you know, Guam and the CNMI are culturally, ethnically the same people. But we were politically divided because Guam was sold to Spain via the Treaty of Paris, and the CNMI, the Northern Islands, were sold to Germany. And so after World War II, the CNMI became under the jurisdiction of the Trust Territories. Similar to our neighbors in Micronesia, the neighboring islands in Micronesia were all under, not exact, but similar kind of political arrangement. When the Northern Islands became a trust territory, they effectively negotiated a Commonwealth status with the United States federal government. While that was happening, Chamorros on Guam were, to put it bluntly, they were offended. They were offended because they felt like they were loyal during the war. And, keep in mind that during the Japanese occupation, the Chamorros in the northern islands were forced to be interpreters. And it was a tough situation, right? I mean, for obvious reasons, there was some bad blood after the war between Chamorros in the north and Chamorros in Guam. And, a lot of Chamorros in Guam saw the northern Chamorros as being traitors. I personally don't think that that's fair. If you're given a choice to help the enemy or die or watch your whole family die, I mean, it's not a difficult choice. It was a tough situation for all of us. And nothing makes sense in war. And so, in that scenario, a lot of Chamorros, after the war felt like, a lot of Chamorros in Guam felt like they were being slighted. If the CNMI could elevate and get this Commonwealth status, then why can't Chamorros in Guam get the same thing? And so we went after Commonwealth because we saw Commonwealth as a viable end. We thought it was something attainable. If CNMI could get it, then we should be able to get it too. So we pursued Commonwealth, and the people, to the caller's credit, the people did vote on Commonwealth overwhelmingly. And so after we voted on Commonwealth, the government went to task and drafted the Guam Commonwealth Draft Act. And that document in its entirety was also vetted by the community. That, yes, you're right, was a legitimate act of self-determination. The problem is that Commonwealth is not a fully self-governing status. It's not. No matter how you spin it, it is not a fully self-governing status and never will be. And I would argue that the CNMI also has unfinished business. The CNMI should not still be a Commonwealth today. And the Commonwealth status is often used, historically has been used as a transitional status. And so, and how appropriate that we're talking about the Philippines today, because this is the great example. The Philippines was also a U.S. territory, treated as a U.S. possession. And there was also, like in Guam, there was also this long debate about, what is a legitimate act of self-determination? What will be the people's desire for their permanent political status? Now, when the people declared their independence, it wasn't a situation where the United States just said, well, you want to be independent? We're going to pack it up and best of luck to you. You know what I mean? Good luck if you get invaded. That's not how it works. The United States had an obligation as the colonizer of the Philippines to ensure a smooth and a just transition into independence. Now, obviously, it's never perfect, and it's every nation has their challenges. But in the case of the Philippines, they were a Commonwealth for roughly about a decade, maybe a little bit more, maybe 12 years. I can't recall exactly. It was at least 10. So at least 10 years of their government was spent under a Commonwealth status. While they were under that Commonwealth status, that was the period of time when the Philippines government and the U.S. government negotiated that transition. And so the United States started to vacate all of these government operations that the federal government controlled. And this is the kicker, I think, for me, is that they not only had to vacate those operations and transfer them to the Philippines government, but they also had an obligation to prepare the Philippines government for that operation. So their obligation was not only to get out of there, but to train people and say, okay, this is what you're going to be doing. Here's how it works. And then once you know what the deal is, then you go in and you do whatever you want and change it however you want to fit your needs. But there has to be a transition. And so for 10 years, over a decade, the Philippines government was kind of, testing the waters and trying to figure out, how are we going to run this thing? Is it going to work for us? What will be our challenges? What won't be? What do we have to anticipate? And let's not forget that the United States and the Philippines had diplomatic allied relations for a long time after they claimed their independence. They also had military bases in the Philippines while they were independent. And so, and that has changed over the years, right? I mean, some of those moments were not so favorable for the Philippines. like Subic Bay was a great example, I think, when they had a number of Marines that were transferred and stationed in Subic Bay under this international agreement between the two nations. The Philippines didn't like the way that it turned out. And so they decided they're not going to renew again, and they're not going to do that again. And so they ended that agreement. And since then, you know, it's not like they haven't had allied relationships, just not to that degree. And I think that that's also a very relevant point for Guam, right? When the military buildup was decided on, mind you, it wasn't decided on by the people of Guam. The people of Guam were never asked if they want the military buildup to happen here. We were never asked at all. We were informed that this is going to happen. And that's the reason why we refused to negotiate with Congress on a Commonwealth draft amendment, because we weren't going to just remove mutual consent. We weren't asking for anything special, guys. Mutual consent. I mean, just think about it for a moment, okay? Let's just strip away all of our political influences here. And let's just get down to the bare basics. Mutual consent. I mean, guys, this is what I teach my sons. You know what I mean? Consent. I know you are young boys, but soon you will be men. And one day you're going to, you know, have a thing for a woman. And if she does not consent to your feelings and advances, it's game over, homie. That's it. You know what I mean? You're not going to get a no and then be like, well, I heard yes. That's not how this works. That's not how it works, my friend. You go to jail for that. I will not bail you out in that moment. You know, so, I mean, when we're talking about mutual consent, you know, I think that it's important to acknowledge that, you know, the people who call this place home have a right to decide what they do or they don't want. This is not about being anti-American or whether you're patriotic or not. This is not even about would you rather be oppressed by America or oppressed by China. How about I don't want to be oppressed? Is that not an option? Is there option C, none of the above? Give me that one. You know? So, I mean, when you think about the buildup, the principles around the buildup was negotiated bilaterally between the Japanese government and the American government. And that's because there was an existing base in Futenma in Okinawa under their international treaty and agreement. And the people of Okinawa had it. They were done. No more. They marched 90,000 people in the streets just to say, in case you didn't hear us, we don't want this base here no more. It's too many problems, and we're not happy. And they did they did their job. The people of Okinawa put the heat on their government, and they let them know what's up. We're not going to deal with this anymore. We want them out. And so the United States government came to an agreement with Japan, and they decided, okay, we're going to move this. We're going to close this base, but we're not just going to close it. We're gonna relocate it. And yes, that is the reason why. There were a number of reasons. So the U.S. military was very problematic in Okinawa. A lot of it was that there was a number of things. There was, you know, kind of training operational accidents. Like one point they had a air training exercise. They crashed a helicopter into a school. Yeah, and like. It was bad, very bad. They had a lot of instances of violence, particularly against women and girls. And so, and you know, this because these are U.S. citizens committing a legal offense in a foreign nation, they don't go to the legal system in Japan. They are court-martialed by the U.S. military, and then they go through their own justice system under DOD. Yeah. And so there were cases where, you know, people were like, well, that's just not right. You know, here's somebody that was accused of, you know, sexual abuse to a young girl, and you're just going to deport them back to North Carolina or whatever. Like, that's not justice for us. Now, people say this is not going to be an issue on Guam because we have an American judicial system on Guam, American legal system. They have to be held accountable to the systems that are in place here locally. But I don't think that that's the issue. I don't think that our community is concerned about, well, how are they going to punish the offenders? I think we're more concerned about, will there be offenders? You know what I mean? I don't care about like if you're going to throw the book at the rapist. What I care about is, did somebody get raped? Is that avoidable? That's my concern. I think it's a legitimate concern. And so, you know, when you look at like all this to, you know, point back to political status, right? Like, why is this a problem? Why are we even talking about the buildup in this political status discussion? And the reason why we're talking about it is because it's only possible for this to be imposed on us if we're a possession, if we're owned by another country and we're not a full participating member of the system of democracy. Because when the United States and Japan agreed, okay, yes, we're going to close this base down, but yes, we're going to relocate it. By the way, Japan is helping to foot the bill. That was part of the deal, was that the United States would invest all of this money to like stop all the operations, shut down this base, and then pay to build a new base where they can move all of these soldiers to. There's a cost associated with that. And part of the deal was that the Japanese government would help pay some of that bill. And so a lot of the money that's being invested in Guam to build the barracks and the training ranges and the firing ranges and all of that stuff, right, is being covered by the Japanese government. And so once they made that decision, the next question was, okay, where's the base going to go? And so ironically, the options were, and you can go and fact check me on this, go read the DEIS. I read that too, man. 10,000 pages. I read that too. The options for the relocation of the base were Guam, the Philippines, Hawaii, and California. Now, Hawaii and California are states, obviously, right? So they both said no. They don't want another base. Hawaii had Kaneohe Marine Corps base. California has one of the largest military bases in the United States, Camp Pendleton. So they didn't want it. We don't need another base. We're good on the bases. And then the Philippines was like, nah, we already did Subic Bay with the Marines. We know what that is. We're good. We're gonna pass. We're gonna pass on the Marines. And so of course the only option left was Guam. Now the DoD came out and said that Guam was actually their ideal location because, and they cited our political status. They said Guam was our ideal location because Guam's political status as an unincorporated territory allows the military to conduct their mission with little to no interference from the local government. Like, they were very upfront about it. Very upfront. Like, this is actually advantageous to us because we don't need to ask permission like we do in the state of Hawaii, or like we do in the state of California, or like we do in the independent nation of the Philippines, or like we would in the freely associated nation of Palau, or the FSM, or the RMI. And so, you know, it's ironic to see how, and I shouldn't say ironic, it is not surprising to see that there are other militarization efforts happening all around Micronesia, in the RMI, in the FSM, and in Palau. The difference is between us and the sovereign nations in Micronesia is that every island nation has a negotiating mechanism with the United States government before they can do anything that they have planned. So in the sovereign nation of Palau, right, the Republic of Palau, for example, Palau historically has been kind of resistant to military development. And you can see that, right, in their international stance, their global stance. They have always kind of resisted military activity. Now, it's not to say that there were no military activities happening in Palau. They were just very, very limited. And now, I think it's fair to say that the military activity has increased in Palau. But love it or hate it, there are a number of different perspectives, right? Outside and within Palau. Some say, oh, yeah, this is great. And others say, I don't know what the hell's going on. But no matter what their opinions are, the official stance of the government has been one of negotiation, has been to say, okay, well, we're willing to listen to you about building an airstrip in Ongar. We'll hear it. We'll hear your plan. And when the military came out and said, okay, well, if you build us this, then what do you want? And I don't know what it is that they asked for, but obviously there was a deal that was made, because there's an airstrip being built in Angar right now. Are you really from Angar? Your dad is from Angar. Okay. I hear that the airstrip has been, for those of you who've never been to Palau, I highly recommend it. Do yourself a favor and go and visit Palau, and also do yourself a favor and hang out with some actual Palauans when you go. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy that goes to Palau and you only hang out at the hotel. Not a good choice. Not a good choice at all. Go meet some Palauans. And I think I personally have really benefited, I feel, from the time that I've spent in Palau. Obviously, I made a lot of really great friends, people that I love, that I feel like will always be my friends for like ever and ever. People that I introduce my kids to and like make them call them auntie and uncle. Yeah, I'm that guy. I'm that guy who like makes permanent friends when I go visit. But the thing that I really appreciated about the time that I've been able to spend in Palau is understanding the way that so many, at least the people I've met, all the people I've met have this very undeniably Palauan identity. And it doesn't matter like their lived experience. Because you meet so many. I love Palau because Palau is a lot like Guam. In the sense, like Palauans are a lot like Chamorros, right? In the sense that Palauans are very worldly, right? Palauans are not like, I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are some that are just like, they grew up in Palau, never left Palau, have, like no other world perspective other than Palau. But a lot of Palau, I would even argue that Palauans are a little bit more worldly than Chamorros, because Palauans do cool stuff like, oh, we have a permanent mission in France. And I'm going to hire a Palauan to go and run that office. That's one of my friends. One of my friends used to totally work in like the permanent mission in Europe, somewhere in Europe. I swear it was France. And I was just like, why are you so cool, man? I'm over here like, hey, are you going to be in Palau? I'm going to come visit. Oh, sorry, man. I'm in France right now because I got this assignment to work this mission. And I'm over here brushing up on my French. Oui, oui. I'm like, what the hell, dude? You guys have embassies? This is amazing. And so it's a super exciting thing for me, you know what I mean? Like to go to Palau and meet people who work in their Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Sounds tight, right? That's because it is. If it sounds cool to you, it's not like a trick. It really is genuinely cool that the Palauan government has a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, yo. Foreign Affairs. They don't send people to start a consulate. That's what we get. That's what consulates are, guys. No disrespect to any of my friends in the consulates. I love you guys so much. You guys are fantastic people. You do great work. You're absolutely still my friend, and I love you. But let's be real. A consulate is not the same thing as an embassy. A consulate is not the same thing as a permanent mission. Embassies and permanent mission, that's like grown-up diplomat stuff, okay? Consulate, that's like, we still got the training wheels on. The reason why you got a consulate is because somebody else handles your foreign affairs. And that's what it is on Guam. If we were fully self-governing, we'd have a right to negotiate diplomatic presence for other nations in Guam. We'd have a right to say, oh, Japan, you want to have an office here, a permanent office, an embassy? Yeah, for sure. This is what it's gonna look like for us. Let's make a deal. Right? What kind of allies are we going to be? How are we going to partner? And does that require an embassy? And so I really appreciate it. I always felt like, it's a great experience for people to go and like meet Palauans, meet Marshallese, meet, people from the FSM, whether they're from Yap, Chuk, Pohnpei, Kashrai, if they work in the government, what do they do? And what is different than what we do here? I always thought it was super exciting that these government officials are over here like high-level negotiating. Guys, when the people of the freely associated states were up at the end of their previous compact agreement, guess who was courting them? Like, and when I say courting them, I mean like whining and dining and try to like get on your good side. The president himself was whining and dining the presidents of the freely associated nations. Tell me that that's not gangster. Come on, man. Come on.
You know it's gangster.
It is. I had super government envy going on. And it was painful for me personally because our governor was there. Our governor was involved. You know what I mean? She went and like sat next to the Secretary of State. It was a super awesome experience for her. I was so happy for her. I was like, man, God, that's great. It's great that you're able to like sit next to the Secretary of State. It's great that you're be able to meet the president and and simultaneously network with our neighbors in Micronesia. But at the same time, it hurt me deep in my soul. Because when you look, like, just look at like the photo, like the official photo, they list our neighbors and the leaders in Micronesia. They list them as like the leaders of their nation. This is the leader. This is the president of the nation of Palau. This is the president of the nation of the Marshall Islands. The president of the nation of the freely associated States of Micronesia, right? Federated States of Micronesia. And then they're like, and then here's the U.S. delegation that includes the governor of Guam. That's where our governor goes. Our head of state, right? Our leader is a part of the U.S. delegation. She is not there as the representative of Guam. You know who's the representative of Guam?
Who?
The president. Oh. Or the Secretary of State, depending on, if the president's there, it's him. If he's not there, then it's the Secretary of State. Because Secretary of State is the one who handles all foreign issues, right? Foreign affairs. And that's how we're looked at, right? It's like, oh, if we're going to have, because the compact, rightfully, has an impact on Guam. So when they sign these compact agreements, somebody's got to speak for Guam. Gov is just there to make people feel like, oh, yeah, Guam is involved. But we're really not. We're really not. And I know we're not. Because I was working for the governor when she was pushing on trying to get, she's trying to get included as an observer in compact negotiations. And it was crazy. I'll never forget this because the governor was like, "Man, I really want to, observe. I want to be a part of it. This affects us. We have a lot of things that we agree with. I've spoken to the other presidents. We know what the problems are. Nobody knows the problems with the compact the way that we do. And we are not enemies." And that was the one thing that was so like grateful because you never know, right? Let's just be real about it. I'm going to address the elephant in the room here. Our inter-Micronesia relations, like within Micronesia, guys, if you're one of these that like says that Chamorros are not Micronesian, just go ahead and unfriend me right now.
Yes, I get that a lot. I'm like,
Yeah.
excuse me, do you not know the meaning of Micronesia?
Like you need to go back to do your geography lesson, yo. I mean, if the region is called Micronesia and your island is in the region, I mean, I'm not that good at math, but I think that makes you Micronesian. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe I didn't do my homework on that one. I'm not a mathematician, but
it is stated
you
out
need
there.
to check your numbers again, man. Your latitude and longitude is off. I'm just saying. And so, that's when I thought about, like, when I had this conversation with Governor and I felt very fortunate that she was taking this perspective into this issue, right? Like, look, we will always have a relationship with our neighbors in Micronesia, which I personally agree with. I don't care what you think. I don't care if you're one of these people who's out there like, oh, the compacts is just draining all of our public funds and blah, 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 and putting a burden on our public services and whatever. You're probably right. But that's not their fault. Is that really their fault? I'm just saying, man. They made a deal in their best interest. Isn't that what you do? You're supposed to make a deal in your best interest? You know whose fault that is? The fault is on the United States government for not giving Guam an equal voice in the decision-making process. Because if Guam had to be consulted on the compact, or even we had to agree, even better, not consulted, we had to agree. If Guam had to agree to the compacts. Imagine how much more empowered Micronesia as a whole is. Guys, Micronesia is no joke. There ain't nothing micro about Micronesia. Nothing. Micronesia is critical in today's global landscape. And whether you want to talk about it in terms of defense or you want to talk about it in terms of economics and trade, you can't do either of those things without Micronesia. If you want trade or war, up to you, trade or war between East and West, you can't do it without Micronesia. And that's the reason why there is a great power struggle in Micronesia between the United States and China. Because they're not stupid. They know that whoever controls this region has the advantage in either a war or a trade war. Up to you. That's why I believe, like, I feel like this is going to be the moment. You know, when the people of Micronesia realize that we're bigger than we think, that we're more powerful than we think, that we're more influential than we think, that we are the choke point. Like, this is it right here. This is it. This region. How much more politically and globally powerful does our region become? You can't tell me that the sovereign nations of Palau, RMI, FSM, plus Guam and the CNMI, that if all of us are sovereign, you can't tell me that we ain't smart enough to figure out how to leverage that.
That is so true.
I refuse to believe it. Mm-hmm. I always joke that, like, I think that this is the secret move for global peace. World peace, guys, is Micronesia. Sovereign Micronesia will be the missing piece to ensure global peace. Because what if all nations, right? What if the five of us were all sovereign? Let's say Guam and CNMI became sovereign. And what if all five of us came together and were like, guys, China and the US, they about to, like, obliterate the planet. If one of them launches a nuke, it's game over for all of us. What if we all got together and were like, hey, we're signing an international peace treaty, a Micronesian peace treaty. And we agree, okay? No matter what you want to do with the U.S. or China, you know, like, Chuk, you can still, like, build a school, whatever. You know what I mean? Palau, you can build a runway if you want to. Guam, you can build a base, whatever you want. But none of us agree that you can utilize our islands for war. You want to be here? Be here. But if you guys going to fight a war, this is a no-fly zone. You can't fly a warplane over our airspace. You can't drive a nuclear submarine through our waters. And if you want to have a war, you got to go the other way around. First of all, war is expensive, guys. And if you got to, like, double up the mileage, it's even more expensive. Neither of these countries, as rich as they may be, can afford a war like that. I'm telling you right now. How wild would that be? What about trade? What about trade? There's no finder's fee. You know, like when you're you're in the States and you got to get you're going from Jersey into the city in New York, right? You got to pay the toll to get on the bridge. I'm just saying, Micronesia is like a bridge, a global bridge. What if you had to pay a toll? Anybody tell me, what is the toll for flying a cargo ship over Guam? What is the toll for sailing a freight carrier through Micronesian waters? Anybody? Spoiler alert, there's no toll. There's no toll. Nobody gets it. But we could we not? I would argue we could. We should. Yeah, we got a call. And we're almost out of time, so I got to do this. Hafa, Randy, you're on the air with us. Would you like to join the conversation?
Yes, I'd love to join the conversation. Thank you for allowing me, sir.
Hey, Randy, how are you?
Very cool. Good. You know, World Heritage with the UN. If we went around, you know, great thing. Governor Guterres, you know, he was big time. You know, everybody's throughout the trust territory. After the trust territory, everybody knew him. And if he went around with a resolution saying that we want to apply for World Heritage, all the islands, and of course Micronesia, Oceania, really, right? And then you go to the UN and you say, just in name only, World Heritage. And then if you get the whole place outlined, and designated as a World Heritage destination in name, that's like the first step of what it is you're talking about.
I agree, and I think that a lot of that speaks to the importance of regional solidarity.
Oh yeah, and now see the other thing is within the Marianas, I know, and we have proof of this, that this is really where humans teach humans how to be human. And the reason why we have this proof of how well we do in all these venues all over the world, and only 200,000 people in the Marianas. And you know, Mr. Wampat, the difference is in the hospitality, and we don't say Milan Zamboka. Right. What we do is we already have drinks and food on the table.
Right.
We don't ask people to come and eat. It's just there already.
Right.
And that's the difference. It's a small little difference. But when you ask people, no, it's okay. But the aspect of the food on the table, pretty soon they'll reach over and they'll get that tortilla. Right. Or they'll reach over and get a little kimchi. Or they'll reach over and get a short rib or whatever. But that is the difference. And because of that simple little difference, we beat China in rugby. We beat India in soccer. You know, the latest one, the Australian girl. We beat Australian girls in beach volleyball. I mean, hello.
I love it.
You know, right. So where we're coming from, exactly this world peace thing, this whole thing.
Right.
Whatever you create, if you wrote something and created that and put it out into the world stage, don't be surprised. No matter what your authenticity is, just as long as you're representing the Marianas, you'll do real well. You know, it'll be top-notch, recognized as something that's very, very meaningful to the people who engage in whatever it is you've presented.
Well, I love that, Randy. I think it's a fantastic concept, especially because at the heart of what you're suggesting is international diplomacy. Right?
Oh, yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
With the solidarity of everybody in the World Heritage.
Right.
All World Heritage, resolution, world peace. And if you can't get world peace, and you change that whole military-industrial complex into the environmental-industrial complex.
Right.
So the environmental-industrial complex cleans the rivers in the Philippines,
right.
cleans the garbage in Pagan, cleans, this with the same manpower and the same ships and the same thing, but instead of the destructive, it's environmental now.
Right.
And we're using the same amount of funds to clean up the earth. And as opposed, because our economic, whole U.S. economics is our export, and our export is weapons.
Right.
And if we're not having a war, we collapse. I mean, that's the crazy thing about America. So that all has to change to where we're environmentally engaging as opposed to the weapon end of it. Yeah.
I love that paradigm shift, Rand. It's a beautiful concept. I think a lot of people can get on board with that idea. You know, I think that there's not a soul on Guam that is ignorant to the world that we live in and the global climate in regard to war and national security and whatnot. But I think that also there's the problem is that we have this discussion in a way that's based around fear. Right. What is what is our greatest fear?
If you're in the state of fear, you're controlled.
Right.
That's the thing about fear. If anybody can impact, like that China bomb or that China
Guam
bomb or whatever, that was made up by U.S. Right. That's a U.S. statement. That's not China saying that.
Right.
China is Walmart. And you're telling me that you're going to put a Gatling gun in front of Walmart and shoot the customers walking in?
Right.
No. And what China says, look, Taiwan, when you're ready, when you want to join us, come on over.
And I think
you hear what I'm saying?
Right.
That's China says to Taiwan. When you're ready to come to Mother China, don't forget to bring what you got in the museum,
right.
and we'll all be part of this China motherhood. But in the meantime, in that aspect, if we could just go to the UN with if Governor Gutierrez wanted to represent or whomever, and you get that all those resolutions signed by all these different and you get that invitation to where all this whole Oceania's World Heritage, there you got it. There's your first step in your solidarity.
I love it. Rand, I want to thank you for
I
your
love
time.
You, bro.
Thanks
yeah,
for you, man.
Keep
Thanks
it up,
for the
okay?
call. I appreciate it. Have
So
a great
excited.
day.
You take care.
All right. That was a great way to end. I'm not taking any more calls. We got to end on that note. We got to end on that note. I can't end with me going off on the audience. It's not right. I gotta end with a positive note. I love it. I love the paradigm shift. I think that's it's a really critical aspect to this whole movement, right? Is the way that we the mindset that we approach it from. One of my close parties always tells me that you gotta have a growth mindset, par. You gotta have a growth mindset. And sometimes it just like makes me nauseous. I'm like, oh God. Oh God, don't tell me about the opportunities right now. I got like a forest fire in my mind. But it really is important to to have that kind of mindset that all of these obstacles and all of these challenges that we face, they really are opportunities, right? Nothing is insurmountable. There's no obstacle, problem that we cannot overcome collectively. But I think that it all begins with how we elevate our level of understanding, right? How much do we really know about what is happening to us and why it's happening to us? And we don't live, yes, we live on an island, but we don't have to live mentally on an island. You know what I mean? Like there are so many nations out there who have done amazing things. Small nations who everybody thought, were at an automatic disadvantage, just like the way they write Guam off. But, small nations all over the world have accomplished amazing things. Somebody in our, one of my friends, Jardine Uggan, she commented on the Instagram live that Palau's passport pledge is like the ultimate sovereign flex. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that 100%. It is totally a sovereign flex. But, I think that even in the success, right, of that concept, it's not just Palau one day waking up and being like, oh, we should do a passport pledge. It was a strategy. It was completely a strategy, and it's something that they've been able to create purely out of this belief in themselves. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we might be a small island nation, but we know what we're doing and we're capable. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I wish all of you the opportunity to one day decide on your own free will what it is that you want for your political future and for the future of your island, your people. So thank you all for tuning in. It was a fantastic conversation. And thanks to Dr. Espina for being here with us this morning. Thanks to all of our callers who came and shared their perspectives. I hope that you folks are going to continue to have these discussions at home and at the dinner table. We will be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. We look forward to hearing from you then. Until such time, have a great day. And don't forget to check out our social media, dcall.guam.gov and GuamCOD on Instagram. Have a good one, everyone. Adios.
KGUM-FM, Daddy Do. The talk of Guam is Wave 105 FM.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by O'Reilly Auto Parts.
I'm Matt Piper. Air raid sirens echo into the skies of Jerusalem. Israel and Iran traded strikes for a third straight day. And while CBS News has learned that President Trump opposed a recent Israeli plan to kill Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tells Fox.
Actually, there's so many false reports of conversations that never happened, and I'm not going to get into that.
CBS's Robert Berger is in Jerusalem.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went to the site of one of these attacks and said Iran would pay a very heavy price for what he described as the premeditated murder of civilians, women, and children. Shortly after he spoke, the Israeli Air Force carried out heavy strikes on Tehran in broad daylight.
A news conference is planned for next hour by the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. It comes after authorities said they have found a vehicle belonging to the suspect identified in the targeted shootings of two Minnesota lawmakers and their spouses this weekend. Senator Amy Klobuchar earlier on CNN speaking about State Rep Melissa Hortman.
This was clearly politically motivated. It was an assassination. And Melissa Hortman is the most incredible person that I wish everyone in the nation knew her. Went into politics with little kids. That's how I got to know her. We were both moms in politics.
A 39-year-old man is dead after being shot during a No Kings protest yesterday in Salt Lake City. Police Chief Brian Redd.
No one should fear coming to a demonstration, peaceful and lawful demonstration in our city. And what happened last night was sudden. and alarming and not representative of our values here in Salt Lake City.
3 people were also believed to be part of the incident were taken into custody. Days after he was thrown out and handcuffed, Senator Alex Padilla tells Face the Nation he was trying to ask a question to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem about immigration raids.
When I had the audacity to try to ask a question as a senator, and you saw the response, everybody's seen the video, it wasn't about me, right? If that's how this administration responds to a senator with a question, don't just imagine what they're capable of to people without a title like United States Senator.
Padilla did not identify himself before shouting at Noem. Flash flooding caused by torrential rains have killed 4 people in northern West Virginia, and rescue crews are out searching for 4 other missing people. Officials say about 4 inches of rain fell in parts of Wheeling and Ohio County within a half hour last night. Some people climbed up trees to get to safety. This is CBS News.
Think O'Reilly Auto Parts for all your car care needs. Get the parts and service you need fast from the professional parts people at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hey, it's Mike Rohn. If I have a choice, I like to do business with companies that actually stand for something. That's why I switched from Verizon to Pure Talk. No offense to Verizon, I'm sure they stand for something. I just don't know what it is. Pure Talk, on the other hand, is a veteran-owned company that supports our military in a big way, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I also appreciate unlimited talk and text and plenty of data for half the cost of the big guys, and I do like being on America's most dependable 5G network for just $20 a month, but what I really appreciate is no contract, no cancellation fees, and Pure Talk's commitment to handle all their customer service in this country. I saw it for myself. I went to Georgia, I got a tour of their headquarters, I met their CEO, and I talked to the same customer service folks that you'll talk to when you dial pound 250 and say keyword micro. Switch today and save 50% off your first month when you dial pound 250 and say keyword micro. Pure Talk, a wireless company that actually stands for something.
The new Pope praises the benefits of sports.
Pope Leo XIV closed the Jubilee of Sport with a Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, reminding everyone that sports can be a means of reconciliation and encounter. He told thousands of athletes of all levels, backgrounds and sports that more than obtaining physical achievements, athletes should give of themselves for others. He said, "Sport is joy of life, a game, a celebration, and champions are not perfectly functioning machines." Sabina Castelfranco, CBS News, Rome.
A new AP NORC poll finds that just over a month after Pope Leo became the first U.S.-born pontiff, American Catholics are feeling excited about their new leader. About 2/3 of American Catholics have a very or somewhat favorable view of Pope Leo, while about 3 in 10 do not know enough to have an opinion, they say. Matt Piper, CBS News.
It hasn't been this hard to find a used car since the pandemic. I'm Jeff Colvin of Fortune magazine with the Fortune Business Update. It's a rough time to buy a used car. As tariffs drive up the cost of new vehicles, Americans are increasingly hanging on to their cars and trucks, reducing